What is up, my friends? Today I'm going to be doing the Way of the Drunken Master build. Now this build is honestly basically a sequel to our Flurry of Blows build, what in my head I am now calling the hit and run playstyle build. So we're going to be taking that build and building off of it and answering questions that people had about that build. So don't consider this a standalone video where I'm going to be doing, hey, here's the race, here's your stat array. That is in the other video, so go check that one out first and then come here. And the main concern with that video that I'll be addressing here is how do we protect our concentration? And the answer is that it comes from our hit and run based subclasses. So the Drunken Master is going to take care of it, the Sun Soul takes care of it, and the Open Hand takes care of it, but in this case we're going to go over how the Drunken Master takes care of it. Our ability to do a hit and run playstyle is predicated on our ability to do Flurry of Blows as a bonus action, which means we cannot do Hex and Flurry Blows, so we cannot do Hex and the hit and run playstyle on our first turn. On our first turn, we're going to set up Hex, and then we're going to do what I call dart juggling. We're going to start the combat out with 2 darts in our hands. So the first turn, we Hex, dart, dart. And after I've thrown those 2 darts, I'm going to pull out a 3rd dart in my hand using my item interaction, and then I'll hold it for next turn. Now, one of 2 things are going to happen during that turn. Either that enemy dies, and we need to move our Hex target. If that's the case, then what we're going to do, move Hex, dart, pull out, item interaction, dart. So now we have a second turn of doing the same thing, keeping our range, saving our key points, and waiting for that opportunity to strike. On the other hand, that enemy actually survived, and now we want to go in. So what I'm going to do is just drop the dart we have in our hand, and I'm going to use my item interaction to pull out my bow staff. Then I'm going to go in, use my full combo, Flurry of Blows, hit them 4 times, and then begin the hit and run playstyle, and continue that until this character is dead. Now, something to keep in mind with this dart juggling is at the end of your turn, if you can pull out a dart, do so. Because let's say we go in and we hit the enemy and then we retreat. If we can, let's pull out a dart and we wait till our next turn. The only sacrifice this does is if we somehow get an opportunity attack, which shouldn't be likely, then we can hit them with our D6 instead of a D8. Oh no, we lost 1 damage. What do we get for losing that 1 damage? Well, it opens us up tactically. On the next turn, maybe that creature died and now we can do the switch Hex, dart, pull out dart, or we can drop the dart and continue doing what we're doing. So long story short, if you can pull out a dart, do so. So up to this point, we've been avoiding damage. Our first turn is all about avoiding damage with Hex and darts. Our second turn is all about avoiding damage with Flurry of Blows, and then all the turns in between until either one of 2 things happens. Either we run out of key, or we think, hey, this fight is won. We no longer need to expend a key to win this fight. This fight is already done. If either of those 2 things happen, we're going to switch our tactics. We're no longer going to be hit and runners. We're going to run in there and we're going to fight them mano y mano. And you might be saying, hey, you might lose concentration. Yeah. And you might be saying, hey, you're going to take some hits. Yeah. So here's the thing about Monk. Monks are squishy, but if we avoid the damage for the first 3 turns of combat, we're not that squishy. We can take a couple of hits, especially if our teammates have been taking hits for us up until this point. If you think about the team's health pool as a single pool of health, we need to contribute ours to it. Otherwise, that health pool is much smaller. So there you go. We are protecting our concentration on Hex through tactics. We're not just relying on Emboldening Bond, for example. We're relying on our hit and run tactic to keep Hex up, which keeps our damage really high. So speaking of Emboldening Bond, we picked that up at level 1. When do we use it? Well, I don't want to use it in combat. There is an argument to be said you can use the Hex and then Emboldening Bond turn, but then we miss 2 dart attacks. I don't really want to miss 2 dart attacks. That can be a significant amount of damage if Hex is up. I prefer to get those in. The best way to use Emboldening Bond is when a fight is forecasted, which happens a lot in D&D. You can kind of predict when fights are happening. You pop Emboldening Bond before the fight begins. It lasts long enough that you have time to get into that fight, and if you manage to do this correctly, then you can go in there without using an action, which is really, really strong, and it's just going to buff everything that we do. But there are going to be times where you use it and then you don't get into a combat, and that's just part of the game. That's just part of this build. That will happen. Don't sweat it. Just move on. So I want to compare this hit and run playstyle with somebody else who's a hit and runner, and I think Swashbuckler is the clear standout hit and run melee specialist in the game. So that's who I'm going to be comparing our damage to. So I'm going to be doing this damage comparison at level 6. This favors us a little bit, but I just wanted to include multi-attack in our damage calculations, and we're going to also do it at level 11. This actually favors the rogue more because we scale at level 12 where they scale at level 11. So I kind of did a split comparison and kind of give some favor in this area and some favor in this area to try and make it a bit fair. Rogues at level 6 are going to have 16 AC. They're going to have between 30 and 60 movement speed, depending on whether or not they hit their first attack. If they hit their first attack, they can now bonus action dash and move away. If they miss, now they have to spend their bonus action to hit, and now they don't get that bonus action dash, and they lose half their movement speed, which is significant. Their average sneak attack damage is going to be 18 at this level, and how do we compare to that? Well, we'll have 1 more AC, and then we're going to have a movement speed between 40 and 50 feet, depending on whether or not we use Flurry of Blows. Now, let's pretend that we hit our full combo. I know that's not likely, but let's pretend for a second that we hit our full combo. We have Hex up, we use Flurry of Blows, we hit all 4 attacks. On average, in that case, we're going to be doing 46 points of damage, which is well over double the amount of damage the rogue is doing. So long as we're hitting more than 50% of our attacks, which is likely even without Emboldening Bond, then we're going to be out damaging that rogue. So it's fair to say we're out damaging the rogue. Now you can say that, hey, the rogue gets sneak attack, that's going to be more damage than your crits will be, and that's fair. So 5% of the time, they're going to be nearly doubling their damage. But here's the thing, is for every 1 attack they make, we're probably making an average of 3 attacks. So we're going to be critting 3 times as often as them. And when you consider Hex dice get rerolled on crits, our 3 crits are pretty dang comparable, if not better, than their 1 crit. Now, as the rogue scales more and more and more, their crits will get better and better, but for now, I'd say we're at least comparable. But we're not going to be doing our full combo every turn, so let's compare the other ones. On our dart turn, we're doing hex, dart, dart. We're going to be doing an average of 22 damage if we hit both of those. If we hit both, we still outscale the rogue, but, there's a good chance, let's say 40% chance we miss, so yes, that first turn, we're not going to be as efficient as the rogue. Fair enough. Another thing I want to compare is, what if we have no hex and no flurry of blows? We're out of key points and we've lost concentration on hex, and we're just getting in there and smacking them. If all 3 of our attacks hit, we're doing an average of 24.5. Once again, if all 3 hit, we're outscaling the rogue. So if we consider, like, let's say we're hitting 60% of the time, yes, we're doing less damage than the rogue, but honestly not by that much. We outdamage them if we have our combo going, we don't if we do not. That's what it comes down to. But when we do outdamage them, we outdamage them significantly. Something else to consider is that if a rogue misses their first attack, they have to make a choice. They either do 0 damage that turn, or they lose half their speed. And that's significant, because if they lose half their speed, that means they're not positioning as well. And they have less AC than us to tank that failure in position. So the rogue might get punished harder. Keep that in mind. They are less defensively powerful than we are. The next thing to consider is rogues can do this all day while we have a timer. But take into consideration that our timer, even at this level, is going to be about 6 turns. We have the hex setup turn, and then we have 5 flurry of blows turns. And let's pretend that, we need to do a hex in between. Well, that extended it even further. So we can do this tactic quite long even now. Most combats are not going to go that late. And the further we get in levels, the bigger that gap gets. At some point, we're going to be constantly doing this tactic, and we'll never have to stop. And I think I did mention this before, but I just want to really drill it in there that Emboldening Bond was not considered in this math. If it was, it'd be even more favored towards the monk. Next up, I want to look at level 11. This is where rogues scale, but our build is going to scale at level 12. So this should favor the rogue a bit. Well, how does it look? We both gained 1 AC. On our end, we've gained 10 movement speed. If they get their sneak attack off, they're doing an average of 29.5 damage. If we get our full combo off, we're doing an average of 50 damage. So you can see that they have scaled quicker than we have, but we are still doing pretty dang close to comparable damage, and it's likely we're going to be hitting more than 50% of our attacks. So as long as we have key, we're still out damaging them significantly. That is only compounded with Emboldening Bond once again. So we are still doing quite well here, and something to consider is they're scaling damage, but we're scaling how long we can do our tactic. At this level, we can do it for 11 turns. There's just no way the combat's lasting that long. Most combats, we're going to be able to just do this the whole time and not have an issue. So we've just scaled differently. Now, that being said, I still want to do the math for the dart turn as well as the turn if we have nothing up, just to keep it fair. The dart turn is going to be doing 24 damage at both hits, so we are being outscaled for that first turn. Fair enough. If our 2 attacks and our martial arts attack hits with no flurry blows, no hex, we're doing on average 27.5 damage, which is about the same as what they're doing, just a little bit less. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to be hitting that 1 attack more often than we're hitting our 3 for good reason. And so we are being outscaled in that case. But I will say the norm is we're still outscaling them as far as damage goes, and then the exception, they outscale us. So what's my conclusion after all of this math? We have a viable build here. There is no doubt. It outperforms the swashbuckling rogue, which is the basic melee hit and runner, but we're also just doing a lot of damage. So do not underestimate this build. This build actually hits like a truck, and it does a good job protecting itself as well. Using Monk's natural mobility. You usually cannot use Monk's natural mobility because of opportunity attacks, but this build really allows us to do that. There is a lot more nuance with this hit and run playstyle than what the swashbuckler has to deal with. The swashbuckler just has to do the same thing, turn in, turn out, and that can be seen as a positive or a negative. If you want a nuanced build where decision making really matters, do I spend my key? Do I spend my hex? What kind of tactic am I performing this turn? Do I want to take a hit this turn, or do I want to avoid a hit this turn? These are all questions you really have to consider with this build. So I'd say it's a much more skill-based build, but it's much more rewarding as well. That when you play it right, you're gonna hit so hard, which is not something you hear about monks often, and you do. You hit like a truck with this build. All right, so I hope I cleared up some air on how I would think about using a hit and run monk. The style changes just a little bit for the Sun Soul monk and the open hand monk. I'd say Drunken Master is the happy in between. The Drunken Master has really good offense and really good defense at the same time. The Wave the Open Hand lets go of some of our defense to get more offense, and the Sun Soul lets go of some of our offense to get more defense. So this is the happy medium and what I consider the gold standard of the monk's hit and run playstyle. But this is just my take on the Drunken Master. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. But other than that, hope you have yourselves a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you then.